As chairman of the Budget Committee, I urge a very strong no vote. Mr. President, at a time of massive income and wealth inequality, at a time when 2 people in our country own more wealth than the bottom 42% of our population, at a time when the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 92%, at a time when we are looking at more income and wealth inequality than at any time in American history, this budget resolution offered by Senator Paul would move us in exactly the wrong direction and make a bad situation worse. Senator Paul's resolution would make the very wealthiest people in this country even wealthier, while at the same time it would make tens of middle-class Americans, people in the middle class, people in the working class, lower-income Americans, even poorer. Mr. President, we remain, sadly, the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right. We pay the highest prices by far in the world for prescription drugs. Half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck, and millions are working at $8, $9, $10 an hour because we still have a disastrous starvation minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. Many millions of Americans today, as housing prices soar, are spending half or more of their limited incomes on housing. 45 million people in our country are struggling with student debt. And at a time when half of older Americans have no savings, people have worked their entire lives, they have no savings to prepare them for retirement, the Social Security benefits that they will receive are inadequate to allow them to live out their remaining years in dignity. So what this budget resolution brought forth by Senator Paul does is exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. Instead of expanding Medicare to make sure that every man, woman, and child in this country has health care as a human right, this is a budget that would lead to devastating cuts to Medicare, cuts to Medicaid, cuts to other public health programs. Senator Paul's budget resolution would cut nutrition assistance at a time when there are children in America today who are going hungry. It would cut federal aid to education at a time when schools are looking for funding to pay the teachers they need adequate wages. But in the midst of this budget that cuts health care, that cuts education, that cuts Social Security, that cuts every benefit needed by ordinary Americans, this is a budget that would give massive tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country. So you have a situation where right now we have a tax system which is broken, which is corrupt, which allows some billionaires in a given year to pay zero in federal income tax. Zero. Some of the richest people in this country in a given year do not pay a nickel in federal income tax. We have a tax system which allows dozens of major profitable corporations making billions of dollars a year in profit to pay in a given year zero in federal income tax. And we have an effective tax rate today in which billionaires pay a lower effective rate than nurses and firefighters. That's what we have today. And Senator Paul's budget, well, you guessed it, you're right. He would give even more tax breaks to the 1% and to the billionaire class. Unfortunately, the vision of America that Senator Paul's budget puts forward, balancing the budget on the backs of working families, the elderly, the children, the sick, and the poor, in order to make the richest people in America even richer, is not just the vision of Senator Paul. I wish it was just his vision, and I got to applaud his honesty for coming forward and putting his vision on paper. Unfortunately, it is the vision of many, many people in the Republican Party. And this is what they want. Senator Paul and many in the Republican Party do not believe that it was good enough to provide over $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% and large corporations, as they did when Trump was president. Not good enough. The budget that we are debating today, Senator Paul's proposal, would make those tax breaks to the wealthy and the powerful permanent at a cost of more than $2 trillion over the next decade. Cutting nutrition programs for hungry children, throwing millions of people off of Medicare and Medicaid, but providing $2 trillion in tax breaks for the very wealthy. Under Trump, Republicans came within one vote of passing a bill that would have thrown up to 32 million Americans off of health insurance and eliminate vital protections for people with pre-existing conditions like cancer or diabetes, and substantially increase premiums for older workers. That was the bill that the Trump administration tried to get passed, failed by one vote, the late Senator McCain. Senator Paul and many Republicans who support this budget resolution believe that what they tried to do a few years ago in decimating the Affordable Care Act, hey, that didn't go far enough. So the budget that we are talking about right now, Senator Paul's proposal would throw up to 35 million Americans off of Medicaid. So what do you do in the middle of a pandemic when you have no health insurance? Well, right now, as a nation today, there are estimates that about 60,000 people a year die because they don't get to a doctor on time. Throw 35 million people off Medicaid, that number will escalate. We're talking about tens and tens of thousands of people who would die because they wouldn't have Medicaid, wouldn't be able to go to a doctor when they are sick. When Donald Trump was in office, he proposed a budget that would have cut Medicare by nearly $845 billion. Senator Paul and the Republicans who will support this budget do not believe that those cuts went far enough. Only $845 billion in cuts to Medicare. The budget we are debating today would cut Medicare by up to $3.9 trillion over the next decade and throw some 29 million senior citizens and persons with disabilities off of Medicare. At a time when tens of millions of Americans struggle with hunger, Senator Paul and the Republicans who support this budget want to cut the SNAP program by $300 billion, throwing some 13 million people off of that program. I don't know what a nation stands for if we cannot feed the hungry and if we cannot provide health care to people who need it. But that is what this budget does. Overall, Senator Paul's budget would make $15 trillion in cuts over the next 10 years, slashing the federal budget by nearly 40% by the end of this decade. So that is where we are today, Mr. President. And again, I would reiterate that this is not just Senator Paul's budget, and I applaud him for his honesty. He's an honest guy, he's a straightforward guy, and he comes forward and he says, this is what I believe. It would be bad enough if this were just the views of one United States Senator. Unfortunately, it is not. These are the views of many in the Republican Party. So, Mr. President, it is absolutely imperative that this budget proposal of Senator Paul be defeated and that we move this country forward in a very different direction. It is a direction which says that the United States government should be representing the needs of all of the people, not just the wealthy and the powerful and big money campaign contributors. It is a vision in opposition to Senator Paul that says that health care is a human right, that we have to stand up to the pharmaceutical industry and cut prescription drug costs in this country in half. It is a vision which says that no, we should not be cutting Social Security. We should be lifting the cap on taxable income, which today is at $147,000, meaning that somebody making $10 million pays the same amount into Social Security as somebody making $147,000. We should be lifting that cap so that we can increase Social Security benefits for all seniors. So, Mr. President, this is not just a budget resolution on the part of the senator from Kentucky, Senator Paul. This really is a contrasting vision of where we want this country to go. Do we want to move into an oligarchic form of society where a handful of people on top have enormous wealth and enormous political power, while at the same time the middle class continues to become small, and we have more and more people living in poverty? So these are contrasting visions of the future of America, and I hope very much that Senator Paul's resolution will be soundly defeated. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.